All right, we are back with another members full moon video. And today we're going to be talking about the full moon in almost 20 degrees of Taurus in the Scorpio-Taurus Polarity. And that will be exact on November 12th at 8:34 a.m. Eastern Time in the US, which is also New York time, and 1:34 p.m. London time. So feel free to jump to any parts of the video via the timestamps as always. Those are provided below the video in the description part, in the description section. So in case you want to watch the video in sequences or want to jump back to a particular part of the video for coaching questions, that's what the timestamps are for. So just click on them. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about full moons. So of course, full moons offer us opportunities to see things in a new light and to have greater awareness and to also guide us away from division towards a more balanced and integrative approach. And that's the goal of a full moon or any opposition really. Now, full moons also illuminate the truth and the consequences of our choices that we've made, usually during the time of a conjunction, or in this case, during the time of a new moon. And so this particular full moon provides this in a lot of ways. Now, the sun is in Scorpio and the moon is in Taurus. And not only that, but we also are dealing with a Sun-Mercury alignment in Scorpio. So the sun is conjunct or aligned with Mercury. And Mercury is retrograde at the time of the full moon. So we feel the energy of this Mercury stronger inside of us. It's more of an internal connection to the energy of that Mercury in Scorpio. And because of this retrograde component, this is in some ways, this full moon phase is sort of like an inner journey or an more intuitive process. And so you may recall that I talked a little bit about this in the last new moon video already, and also in my Mercury retrograde in Scorpio webinar, which, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen that yet or who are not Superstar members, this is still available for purchase until November 13th on my website. So feel free to go to the webinar page there if you want to watch that. And if you can't find it, feel free to email me and ask me about it. Now, what we can ask ourselves here with this Mercury retrograde component in this full moon chart, what regrets, resentments, and misunderstandings need to be reconciled? Mercury retrograde really helps us to recognize the part we played and the lessons we learned and the necessity of forgiving everyone involved, including ourselves. So it's really important that we allow ourselves to sort of like process through things that have felt disempowering or things that have felt uncomfortable or things where we have felt a betrayal of some sort, anything connected to that Scorpio energy, right? So we need to process through that on an internal level. Now, because of its retrograde status, Mercury will spend a little over 2 months in Scorpio, which is very unusual because it's usually just 3 weeks, right? So that's a much longer time. And Scorpio, of course, is the sign that's most concerned with emotionally authentic relationships. So this really provides extra opportunities for integrating our shadow and healing any relationship issues connected to intimacy, honesty, or trust. And the latter may include core issues around shared resources and power struggles that we may have with other people, right? So again, so this is a 2-month period and it started October 3rd and it will last until December 9th. So that's the length of which Mercury is in its Scorpio phase. Now, the other thing with this full moon is that Neptune in Pisces will be stationing at the time of the full moon. And with all stationing planets, of course, that means that the planet is going to be more exalted and is bringing a heightened sensitivity towards our surroundings, including fellow humans and other beings in the world. And so what we really want to do with this heightened, exalted Neptune component is we want to, as best as we can, have a gentler, more intuitive approach towards life, ourselves, others, whatever works. And I'll talk a little bit more about, the Mercury Sun alignment and the Neptune in Pisces component in a little bit when we talk about aspects. Now, we also get a chance to see how far we've come since the new moon was exact, which was October 27, 28, right? Depending on where in the world you live. And so what you can ask yourself here is, how far have I come in regards to investigating or understanding my deepest desires? Like that Scorpio, deep, like passionate desires for things, right? And how am I doing with owning the previously denied or rejected parts of myself? Yeah, so how are we doing with that? Because remember, in the new moon video, we talked a little bit about how we need to like own some of these shadow parts of ourselves, right? So how am I doing with that since the end of October, right? And what might the next step be down that path? Is there anything more that I can do to kind of like integrate some of these parts of myself, or owning them, or bringing more of a conscious approach to what that might be, really investigating it? And what decisions could I make over the next 2 weeks that might support me on that journey? So what decisions could you make that might support you on that journey? And feel free to journal on that or meditate on that. You may not have the answer for these questions yet, right? It's not about having the answers, right? It's really more about investigating and allowing the answers to show up, right? To stay open so that the answers can come to you. It's really more of an intuitive process. Now, if you want to have access to the coaching questions from this video, because there's going to be many more, if you want to journal on them or meditate with them, or some of them at least, right? You can get access via the full moon article that's on my website. Please go to your membership portal, which is, if you click on my account, either on your phone or on your computer. I think on the computer it's on the top right hand corner, and on the phone you have to pull down a menu to get to the my account link. Now, if you click on my account, and then just kind of like go to where it says my content, which will pop up right away once you go into your account, and you will see the full moon article there. Or you can also wait until I email it out to you. I will send an email out with the full moon article in it for everyone who's a member. If you are seeing this video and you haven't received the email for the full moon, let me know right away. Okay. All right. Now, let's take a look at the Scorpio-Taurus polarity in more detail, because that's what this full moon is all about, right? Before we go into aspects. Now, the full moon has both a Taurus and a Scorpio spotlight, basically, right? Like it's the moon and the sun. And these spotlights basically highlight our relationship to our physical body, what we value on the physical plane, and the planet we live on, and also what we enjoy on the physical plane, right? And that's Taurus. And the other highlight is towards our relationship to emotional authenticity, intimacy, sexuality, empowerment, disempowerment, death, rebirth, endings, beginnings. You can see with Scorpio, it's very sort of like black and white, right? Endings, beginnings, death, rebirth. And some of that can, of course, also feel quite intense, right? So Scorpio has an intensity to it. And so all of this is asking us to recognize our deepest desires and truest motivation. And so you can ask yourself with this full moon, what do I truly value? What's really, really important to me? And what deserves my attention, my appreciation, and my care? And which of my values stem from social conditioning? And this is very important, and we'll get to why this question is so important until a little bit later, so stay tuned. Now, at its best, Scorpio is associated with transformation and our capacity to shed what may have served us in the past but now hinders our growth. So with Scorpio, we have to remember that some of these behaviors that we have, they come from the past, from a place where we had to engage in a particular behavior in order to survive, right? In order to, so to speak, in order to thrive, actually, survive and thrive. But some of these behaviors that we have adapted at that point in childhood or in young adulthood, they don't actually they no longer work, and they no longer give us what they meant to give us at that time in the past, right? So now, because they're no longer working and they're no longer actually required the same way, these behaviors are no longer required, it actually hinders our growth. And this is important to recognize with Scorpio. These behaviors are not bad behaviors. They're just behaviors that we connected with because that's what was accessible to us. That's what we were able to do at that point in time. And it saved us and it helped us at that point in time. But that doesn't mean that it still does. So we're really here asked to shed something in our lives, right? We're being asked to shed either a false belief, perhaps, or a fake identity, or a way of being, or a way of behaving, right? But it could also be a relationship or a job or something else that's more concrete, right? So anything that's kind of like not really helping us be fully alive or be fully ourselves, authentically speaking, right? Now, let's talk about the Sun-Mercury alignment in Scorpio one more time, right? Now, that brings us a heightened focus towards thinking about the unknown, facing our worst fears, or dealing with loss in some way. And letting go of something that's old and letting in something new in terms of how we think about things. And so if we remain attached to the old because we might have a fear of letting go, to let something in that's new, but we don't know what that new thing is, so we're kind of like maybe just terrified of the new, so to speak, right? We're likely to experience this as a dark, difficult transition in our lives, right? So whenever we're holding on and we're not allowing ourselves to let go, that can really cause us suffering, right? But if we're not holding on, if we're allowing ourselves to go with this process, and it's literally a process, right? If we're allowing ourselves to go with this process, it really could help us build inner strength and show us what cannot be taken away from us. And so we will see at last that nothing outside of us can take away the power and resilience that actually lives within us. And that's the thing. Power is always something that lives within you. It's never something that is outside of you or that needs to be taken from somebody else. That's not true power. True power is always inside of you. And each one of us has it inside of us already. So it's not actually something we have to grab or seek or become. It's already there. We just have to access it. And we access it by shedding the stuff that covers it up, right? So ask yourself, what has come up for me since October 11th? This is when Mercury started to move into its shadow. And what, if anything, have I already revisited or even reprocessed since Mercury went retrograde back on October 31st? So remember, with these shadow phases and retrograde phases, there is this sense of that something it's a process, right? We're engaging in an inner process. We're engaging in something that needs to be worked through, that we have to revisit several times. Kind of what we talked about in the webinar, right? Mercury retrograde webinar. Now, what am I still obsessing about? What am I scared about? What if I surrendered my fears 5% more deeply than I have in the past? And what if I gave myself 5% more freedom to sense my inner strength my fierce open heart, and the passionate love for life that is pumping through my veins? And that's a very beautiful Scorpio question in a way. For those of you who have a lot of Scorpio in them, you can probably feel that. There's the fierce open heart, and the passionate love, and the pumping through my veins. That's all very Scorpio, right? Scorpio words. Now, what place of power would I stand in then if I allowed myself that freedom to really connect to that strength, to that heart, to that passion, to that, that inner right? What place of power would I stand in then? So again, great questions to journal on and meditate on. Feel free to just let yourself choose the questions, or allow maybe the questions to choose you, I should say, which would be a better way to allow yourself to be really pulled in by a question. So whichever questions those are, use those questions. Now, the sun's passage through Scorpio is a time of transition, a time to go within to honor the realities of death and rebirth, the cycle of life, which we can see very beautifully in nature and also with the seasons, right? We can see the cycle of life as like completely natural. When we look at nature, and we look at the leaves falling off the trees, or when we're looking at, the earth becoming really frozen and cold, we can see that this is a time of, closing in, and time of things dying or ending. But that cycle of life also makes way for spring, right? It makes way for things growing again and coming fresh out of the ground. And this is really how we want to look at the Scorpio energy in its highest potential, right? It's a cycle of death and rebirth, in the sense that certain things need to die in order for new things to be able to grow, right? Now, it is completely natural, right? So we don't need to think of Scorpio as this like weird, intense, like occultic thing, which it is too, but it also is completely natural. We need Scorpio in our lives. And every single one of us has it somewhere in our chart, right? We have it somewhere, and we need that energy to renew ourselves. So what you can ask yourself here is, what am I invited to shed at this point in my life? Is there a cycle in my life that is ending? And what might a new beginning look like? So, ultimately, Scorpio teaches us that every ending is also a beginning, right? And so what we want to be aware of, though, is sort of the more denser vibrations of Scorpio as we're going through this intense Scorpio phase, with Mercury being retrograde especially, because the denser vibrations will show up too. And so we need to be aware of them and really give ourselves permission to see them and to bring consciousness and light to them. And so these denser vibrations are trust issues, black and white thinking, addiction to drama and darkness or substances, and anything we want to prevent, anything where we feel like, worst case scenario, something bad is going to happen, and we're starting to go no, right? So protecting. So we could really find ourselves coming from a very instinctual, self-protective place, from a survival place, right? With all of this, rather than really going into our intuitive, love-based spaciousness with this, right? Now, let's take a look at Taurus, right? So the other pole in this balancing act is Taurus. And so Taurus seeks a healthy relationship with the physical world. And the moon in Taurus calls us back to our senses, right? All the senses that we have, the smelling and the hearing and the touching and the tasting and all of that good stuff, right? Taurus is often associated also with money. But ultimately, of course, it comes down to what are my values, because money is just a reflection of all of that, right? It's just a sort of like a subset of our values. And so we're invited to remember that we're blessed with this miraculous thing called the body, or our birthday suit, and a beautiful, precious planet that we live on that has all the resources we can possibly hope for or need. And if we really can just appreciate that and remember that that is really something that's already a given, like that body is yours, that you were given, when you came into this, in this world, into this human experience. And this planet was already here with all its resources, right? So this is a beautiful thing. But if we feel unworthy or empty inside, then what we tend to do is we tend to connect to the material things in our lives as a way to fill that emptiness. So we accumulate material objects, or we try to distract ourselves from the emptiness or the unworthiness that we're feeling by, gathering things. And so this is really important that we keep that in mind, that there can be a sort of like something that's very out of balance depending on how we feel about ourselves, depending on how much we honor our physical experience, how much we honor, the gifts that we have, and how much we value ourselves, not because we have done something, not because we are being valued by somebody else, but just because we are alive, just because we have a human body, right? So what you can ask yourself is, what do I spend my time, my energy, and my money on? And if this reflected my relationship with myself, what might this mirror show me? And then you can also ask yourself, and if you can, of course, what works best is if you can be really completely honest with yourself here. Do I feel worthy? Do I value myself? And how do I show my value to myself, to others, to the world, right? Now, some other questions you can ask here too is like, do I seem to struggle with money? And struggling with money can look very different for a lot of different people. It doesn't matter whether you have it or don't have it, right? Struggling with money can happen to people who have a lot as well. So struggling with money could be accumulating it, but it could also be keeping it, or it could be making the most of it, right? So do I seem to struggle with money? And does money fill an emotional void in my life? And again, you really want to kind of like allow yourself to not answer this question right away, but kind of maybe sit with this question, because it may feel a little bit uncomfortable to answer that question, or you may not want to answer that question. You may want to go, oh, that's not me. I don't need to feel any emotional void with money. That's silly. Right? We may immediately feel that reactiveness towards that question. But if you could just allow yourself to just sit with that and maybe meditate on it and see, well, where might that show up in my life? And I'm not saying that it shows up everywhere necessarily, but is there a moment or a time in your life where you use money to fill an emotional void? And do material objects do that for you? Or is money simply a tool or an energy exchange for me? How might a shift in perspective help resolve my relationship to money? And ultimately towards myself, of course, because money is just sort of like a symbol or the archetype of what actually goes on underneath in my relationship with myself, right? Now, Taurus teaches us about the power of beauty and about things that make us happy on a physical level. So we're also called to develop our talents and our sense of self-worth, and we're helped to discover and manifest what we truly value and enjoy right? Taurus is about enjoyment, like really enjoying life, like having all the, like a really good meal, or like having, cuddling up with a really soft blanket. Like these are very Taurian experiences, and very much connected to our senses, right? So if we are to experience the highest vibration of Taurus, a healthy sense of self-worth is important. So what you can ask yourself is, what matters most to me? And what makes me happy deep down? And what is in the way of me honoring the physical plane? And this could be a really important question for those of you who have this idea of spirituality being more important than the physical body or the physical world, right? So what's in the way of me honoring the physical plane, of honoring my body, honoring the planet, honoring physical beauty, right? What is between me and feeling valued in the world? So these are all kind of like connected, these questions in some way, of course, right? So feel free to journal on those if those questions call to you. Now there's two more questions. What if I was the only one of me there will ever be? And what might my value be then? And of course, this is a question that's very, it's a question that's really important to ask, because there is only one of us, right? Like there is no other person that's exactly like me. There might be people that look a little bit like me. There might be people who have, similar aspirations to me. There might be people who have similar interests, but there is only one me, right? It's like snowflakes. Like every human being, there's just one human being that's exactly that way in their complete combination. Do we have stuff in common as human beings? Of course. We have core issues or core things that we all desire or have in common. But the whole package, right? That's like snowflakes. So what if I was the only one of me there will ever be? Ever. Ever, 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 ever. What might my value be then? It's just something to kind of play with a little bit and see what that brings up. Now in Taurus, we discovered that what we most require on a physical level. And in Scorpio, we explore what we most desire in terms of emotional desire. And also what we most fear, because fear is also an emotion, right? Now let's talk about some of the other aspects here in this full moon chart. Now Venus, the traditional ruler of Taurus, is currently in Sagittarius and squares Neptune in Pisces. And this Venus in Sagittarius really comes back to like the perspective that we're having about things, right? So this suggests that the key to loving and valuing ourselves currently lies in the realization that we are spirit beings on a constant journey towards growth and evolution. A journey which requires an open mind, an open heart, kindness, and acceptance. And so really this invites us to be more aware of our current connection to the divine and what we believe about it. What's my connection with the divine? What do I believe about that, right? Now, this also heightens our imagination, this aspect, our intuition, our capacity for compassion, but it could also make us more susceptible to fantasy, wishful thinking, or escapism of all sorts, especially when it comes to our relationships or financial decisions. So we do want to kind of be aware of that. It is a square, right? The Venus-Neptune square. It's not a trine or a sextile. And squares they're about challenges, right? So we want to be aware of the challenge that a Neptune-Venus square could bring about. So with this square, ask yourself, where do I feel the need to convert others? What might be possible if I allowed myself to shift from my conditioning, so all the social filters that we've grown up with, or that we have been born into in terms of our environment and society, right? So what if I could allow myself to shift from my conditioning to feeling, sensing, or simply connecting to the truth of who I am, the essence of I am that. And I don't know if some of you maybe have, read in Eastern philosophies, this I am that is just simply this sense of like, I am, which means I exist, right? I am, I exist. And I am that would be I am that. I'm all of it, right? I am that. So are there any relationships, the one to myself included, that are asking for a shift in perspective? Right? So that's the Venus in Sagittarius, right? A shift in perspective. Or possibly forgiveness. Are there any relationships, including the one with myself, that are asking for forgiveness or for compassion? So this aspect could really bring some restlessness or overindulgence. So you want to be aware of that. So as best as you can, don't believe everything you hear, and keep checking in with other people or your higher self about what is actually so. And what is actually so is not something that you need to ask the mind. What is actually so is what you want to ask your heart, right? Because what is true, what is truth, very often lies in the answer very often lies in the heart. It doesn't necessarily lie in our conditioned brain, right? So you may also want to double check yourself when it comes to physical indulgences, like unhealthy foods, excessive or unsafe sex, strong desires for escapism, like alcohol, drugs, love, or being in love, religion, cults, right? Things like that. Now you can ask yourself, if there was a way to fully honor my spiritual self in my relationships without the need to lose myself in the process, what might that way be? So this could be a really beautiful question to contemplate. Now, Neptune in Pisces also trines the Sun-Mercury alignment in Scorpio and sextiles the moon in Taurus. So it's basically kind of making an alignment with this full moon opposition, right? With this Sun-Mercury moon opposition. Neptune is connecting to both of these sides. So this combination invites us to slow down. It invites us to simplify and to reflect on how we could create more beauty, pleasure, and ease in our lives, as well as healthy emotional connection to others. So you can ask yourself here, how could trusting my intuitive voice support a healthy sense of self-worth and a healthy emotional connection to others? So a lot of these things, Neptune is very much about allowing there to be a flow, allowing there to be a trusting with life, right? Because Neptune knows that everything is interconnected, that everything is one. So how could trusting my intuitive voice, also Neptune, right? Intuitive voice, support a healthy sense of self-worth and a healthy emotional connection to others? Taurus, Scorpio. Right? So this combo also facilitates compassion for ourselves and others, encouraging us to resolve grudges or resentments, which sometimes can happen with Scorpio, right? So one of Scorpio's primary themes, of course, like I mentioned earlier already, is betrayal. And so that, of course, can mean a lot of things, right? We can feel betrayed in a lot of different ways. We can feel betrayed by our parents. We can feel betrayed by our own body, by our partner, whether that's business or personal or romantic partner, by friends, by society, by religion. We can feel betrayed by our conditioned self, by our ego. So there's many ways in which we can feel betrayal. And one other thing to consider is that when we feel betrayed, we tend to put blame on the other party, whatever that other party is, right? So with Neptune though, right? Neptune understands that there is no such thing as blame, that everything is always flowing perfectly and beautifully. And so the planet represents unconditional love, right? It's really, Neptune truly is unconditional love. It's not love as a feeling, it's love as a state of being. So by bringing conscious awareness and loving acceptance to some of these autopilot behaviors or reactions or attitudes that we have, we can start to see things in a new light. And therefore we can come to a place of understanding and forgiveness and self-acceptance. And this is healthy for our sense of self-worth. And it's healthy also for our ability to let go of these grudges and places where we're holding on out of, self-protection or fear, which is that Scorpio stuff, right? So ask yourself, what could I do today in this very moment even to experience love as a state of being rather than a feeling, like when you feel love towards another person, right? But actually just feeling love as an energy field of love, right? As a state of being. And could it be as simple as simply allowing myself to be and be and be? Now, from a perspective of beingness or awareness, is it possible to betray or deceive ourselves or others? So really check in with yourself on that one. Just really, if you can tap into this state of beingness and state of love, and from that place, from that perspective, is it possible to betray or deceive ourselves or others? So just play with that if you wish. Now, another aspect here is Mars, which is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, and is currently in Libra, making a sextile to Jupiter in Sagittarius. So that's an opportune aspect, right? And so this gives us the opportunity to tap into our optimism, our enthusiasm, and our sense of expansion, expanding the mind, expanding the heart, expanding our whole being, right? So we're more likely to connect with others in an active and fun way. And so what you can ask yourself here is, what actions could I take right now that would help create expansive collaborations and support everyone involved in learning from each other? Wouldn't that be beautiful if we could all just learn from each other without trying to fight and control each other and, put each other down? Like, just this openness of like, let's just get together and learn from each other. Even though we have differences, even though we're not the same, right? And what perspectives or attitudes would support a win-win outcome in my relationships or partnerships right now? What perspectives or attitudes would support a win-win? Yeah, so also remember that since Jupiter will be switching signs soon, we are at the last stretch of this particular growth experience with Jupiter in Sagittarius, so make it count. And we will address Jupiter's shift from Sagittarius to Capricorn in more detail in our next forecasting forum, live on November 13th. And if you'd like to find out how this planet's 1-year transit through Capricorn might impact you personally, join us. This is going to be an important one, since Jupiter will be moving into the same sign that Saturn and Pluto currently are in. So somewhere we're probably, these are all moving closer to each other. So there's something in your chart, an area of your life that's definitely going to be more impacted by all of these transits. So if you want to know about that, feel free to join us either live or via the MP4 video presentation. And if you're already a star or superstar member, watch out for an email on the day of the webinar, and also a link that I will send you the day after the live event to watch the recording of the live event. Now, if you are a universal member, you can purchase a registration for this month only, or you can take a plunge and upgrade to star or superstar membership, and then you can join us every month at no extra charge. Either way, you can do both on my website. You either go to the homepage and look for the Forecasting Forum Countdown and register there, or you can go to your membership portal and go to your account and look for your subscriptions, and in the subscription tab you can get to a place where you can upgrade to star or superstar membership. And just remember, you can upgrade and downgrade at any point whenever you like. You can also pause or unpause your memberships anytime you like. So there's a lot of flexibility there with these memberships. Just keep that in mind. And if you're confused about any of it, just feel free to email me and ask me questions, okay? Now, so this is the last aspect that we're talking about before we're going to sum it all up. Now, Pluto, which is the modern ruler of Scorpio, is currently in Capricorn, aligning with Saturn. And both of these planets currently trine the moon in Taurus and sextile the sun Mercury alignment in Scorpio. So let's unpack all of that. That's a lot, right? So this gives us an opportunity to investigate our thinking more realistically, especially when it comes to potentially outdated perspectives. So what you want to ask yourself here is, what is asking to be transformed? And what needs to be investigated if I am to build something meaningful long term? So what needs to be investigated if I am to build something meaningful long term? And that's really key here. We're invited to really build something meaningful. And what am I drawn to on a deep instinctual level? And how might I achieve a shift from my familiar, protective, analytical thinking to the not so familiar, inspired, intuitive thinking? And what do I feel truly passionate about? And all of these questions can actually, or I should say all the answers to these questions could really help us on this journey towards greater fulfillment out there in the world, right? So really allow yourself to investigate or sit with these questions if you can. Now, this is a kind of a sobering combination, of course, and so it is focused on self-responsibility and questions of worth. And when we're talking about questions of worth, we're both talking about our self-worth and where we place value outside of ourselves. And so perhaps surprisingly, this could make it an excellent period for financial partnerships and innovation of some kind in our lives, certain things that we're already currently working on or something new that we want to be working on. And some of these things could really pay off. Now, with this combination, with this aspect, we can manage our finances better with more attention to sustainability, planning, and strategy, while also honoring our social and environmental responsibilities. So what you can ask yourself here is, how realistic am I about what I can afford? What does that mean for me long term? How responsible am I about my finances and my long-term goals? And what role does my environment play in all of this, right? Because sometimes, we're not an island, right? I mean, we have to interact with people, we have to interact with life. So how does the environment, the people, the places, the things that we interact with, what role does that play in terms of how we connect to our approach to finances, our approach to long-term goals? our approach to being responsible around these things, right? What role does the environment play in all of this? Now, do I live in accordance with what I truly value? And that might require some very deep honesty, right? Because we might, in some places, we might live in accordance with certain things that we value, but in other places we might not. And could I allow myself to take my time instead of rushing into something? And this might be challenging for some of us who are more impatient or who have in the past been able to do things much faster. And now with all these planets in more feminine energies, we're being invited to slow down, right? Because feminine energy is not fast. It's a process. It's slower. It's intuitive, right? So where would I set clear and healthy boundaries if I were aiming to establish empowering relationships based on self-love? So where would I set clear and healthy boundaries in my life if I were aiming to establish empowering relationships based on a healthy sense of self-love? So now we can sum it all up. So let's sum it all up. All together, this full moon challenges us to rethink our priorities, listen to our heart. Always a good idea, right? Listen to our heart. Use our power wisely, and remember we're all part of the human family. Use the power of this full moon to get grounded in our physical and emotional body. Break up any stagnation in your system or relationships and accelerate your transformation by immersing yourself in a deep connection to all of life. Remember, you are connected. You are intrinsically interconnected with all of life. That does not change whether you believe that or not. You know, we are a part of the whole, whether we want to be or not. So connect to your deepest passions. Let go of emotional attachments or traumas from the past. In other words, overcome your fears and connect deeply, intimately, and authentically to yourself and others. As best as you can, of course, right? You're not going to necessarily, be perfect or do it 100%, and that's okay. That is completely okay. We're just trying to align ourselves with the energies, right? We're not trying to be perfect here. We're just trying to do our best. So here are some final coaching questions for this full moon. If letting go always brought more peace, what would I dare to release? And if I knew for certain that holding on kept me small, could I then simply let go as best as I could? And might that give my higher power the space to support and guide me if I could just simply let go? And how could my breath support me in effortlessly releasing the old and allowing the new to flow in? Just feel into that, right? Like even just taking a deep breath and allowing that to let go. I mean, that is the simple process of letting go. Everybody can do it. Everybody can actually let go. Babies can let go, right? Actually, babies are better at letting go than most adults. But everybody can let go because it's just as simple as taking something in and then letting it flow again. It's allowing there to be a flow rather than trying to grasp and grab and hold, right? Or reject. So remember, when enough of us are able to keep our energy levels high and authentically integrate all of who we are, really embrace ourselves fully, love ourselves fully and passionately, those who rely on the denser energies, which are fear, grabbing, holding, all that stuff, those who rely on the denser energies will be forced either to change or to leave. So just keep that in mind, that what if we were in human form at this time to assist with the birthing of a new and higher collective consciousness on Earth? What if that's the reason why you chose to be here in this particular body right now? So talk about be the change you want to see, right? Like Gandhi is one of my favorites. So I love to quote Gandhi. And this is probably one of my most favorite quotes of his. I have a whole book of quotes of Gandhi. And this is the book. And I was actually thinking about maybe posting one quote, because there's there's so many of them in here. I was thinking of just posting one quote each day, on Facebook or somewhere, so that people can really get connected with this man was really wise and was really a genius. And I think all of us could really use this inspiration and this ability to connect to, the power that is within us already, that we can truly be the change that we want to see in the world, each one of us. It's just a matter of commitment and a matter of intention. Now, if you do have an ascendant, career point, or personal planet in 18 to 22 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Leo, then this full moon is definitely going to impact you more than others. But even if you don't have points or personal planets in those degrees and signs, take a look at your natal chart. Look to see where does 20 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio land in your birth chart. So that's an opposition, right? So you'd have to look at where's Taurus, 20 degrees of Taurus, 20 degrees of Scorpio. And then look at the houses that these points land. And the houses that are impacted by the full moon will indicate which areas of life need to be integrated and balanced over the next 14 days. Now, if you have any questions about the monthly forecasting forums, about memberships, about soul-based astrology courses that I offer online, about astrology in general, please do not hesitate to reach out. Just email me at info@astrologercoach.com. If you have any personal questions, please ask them during the monthly forecasting forum on November 13th. Or, of course, you can always book a reading. And please remember, if you're a star or superstar member, you do get discounts for your readings. So make sure you're signed into your membership portal when you buy them. Okay? All right. So have a fantastic, fantastic full moon. Remember, it's an extroverted time where we're engaging with people, connecting. And this might be a very passionate or very full-on engaging, full-on connecting with other people. So have fun, have a good time, and I will speak to you again in a couple of weeks. And for those of you who join me for the forum, I'll see you next week. All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.